Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Growing Tuesday. And as has been seen in the last 2 weeks, we have been focusing on domestic violence. And today's emphasis will be on gun violence. Again, we have Dr. Anita Lee Chester here with us, as well as a new crew with her. And so we welcome everyone, particularly those who are online, welcome. And we are going to have a word of prayer and then get right into the program. So at this time, let us pause for a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for all that you do for us. It is not without our understanding, Lord, that you woke us up this morning and you have kept us until now. And so we are grateful because your mercies continues to be extended. Lord, we thank you for all those who are present here in the sanctuary and those who are online. Father, this is a very important topic, one, Lord, that should provide us not only with knowledge but also with resources. And so I pray even now that you will bless Dr. Chester and her guests as they come and present this program to us. I ask, Lord, that it will be of great benefit, not just to us, but to the community at large, the world at large, because there will be others viewing this sometime to come. We say thank you for hearing our prayers in Jesus' precious name. Amen. At this time, welcome again, Dr. Chester.
Thank you, Dr. Bignall, and thank you, Riverside, once again for having us here from the Metro Public Health Department to have this important conversation with you. I am so privileged, like I've said every Tuesday when I show up, to have a great team of professionals that work with me at Metro Public Health Department. And so I'm going to invite them to join me on stage. Mr. Otis Carter, would you please join me on stage? Mr. Toya Wilson, would you please join me on stage? Ms. Alicia, would you please join me on stage? Ms. Valeria's coming back to us. She was here with us last week, and she's returning. And then Mr. Derek, would you please join us on stage for this conversation? We appreciate you being here. We're thankful to the audience online and those of you who are here in the audience as we continue our conversation about violence. And tonight in particular, we're going to talk about gun violence. And if you have a question, if you're online, drop it in the chat. I know I have Pastor Jones and others that are here, Dr. Jones, that will monitor and help us with questions. Field them for us. We appreciate that. And we're hoping to have a good time. So let's level set a little bit. We've been talking about violence and we've been sharing some data with you. And so I want to share some. You know, there's some things we shouldn't be known for at the top, of the heap. One of them should not be violence. We should not be proud to say that in Tennessee, we rank 9th in the country for gun violence. See, that's not something to brag about. You know what I'm saying? We rank 9th for taking care of people, for feeding people, for doing those things. We want those statistics, but we do not want to rank that high for violence. But that's where we are in Tennessee. That's pretty sobering when you think about that. Think about that. It is pretty sobering to think that we rank so high as it relates to violence. I was reading some data today that says that Tennessee is not a good state to be living in right now. That also made me a little sad, you know what I'm saying? Because we're here, and we want to make sure that we're living a fulfilling life. So here we go. When we talk about looking at data from 2023, homicide, we're at 103. Violent offenses, 8,908. Violent crimes, 1,257 per 1,000 individual. That is very sobering. One violent crime is too much less when we're talking about 1,200. But here's where it gets even more daunting when we're talking about the average per year of people who die from gun violence, listen to this. 1,385 people die and 2,697 are wounded by gun violence here in Tennessee. That is sobering. Don't you think, Latoya? That is sobering. So I have some, we'll come back and share some more data, but I want to just talk for a minute to my team. So I want you to help me give a warm applause to Miss Latoya Wilson. Let me tell you something about this professional. She was chosen from among 200 individuals, the only choice to represent Tennessee across the country, looking at violence and crime and safety in the country. So she's been in California California and DC for the last 9 months with other professionals across the country, looking at what we should do and what's happening. And that's a huge deal for us to have one of our very own as a representative from Tennessee. So thank you, Latoya, for having. So let me pose my first question to you, Latoya. What are you hearing around the country about violence, and how do you think we're doing in Tennessee as opposed to other countries?
Well, Dr. Ann, thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you, everybody, for the applause. It's work that I love to do in the community. And around the country, they're doing some wonderful work in Baltimore, in California, out in, well, Nashville is actually doing some wonderful work. However, it hasn't hit the airwaves yet. And it's disheartening to hear about how much gun violence is happening. At the same time, we can do so much more. And it only takes one person to start it. And I feel like we've started it here in community safety in the behavioral health and wellness area, reaching out to the communities, letting the communities know that we have resources for them in order to assist them in getting out of the life and not having to pick up a gun.
Thank you, appreciate that. So why do you think we're having the conversation? I just want to give a big shout out to the team here at Riverside for having this conversation and entertaining this conversation, because this is not what's happening in faith-based communities around the country. So Dr. Jones and team, thank you so much for having the conversation and welcoming the conversation in this space, okay? So let me ask this question, and anyone can answer. Why do you think it's so difficult for us to talk about gun violence? Why do you think it's so difficult for us to have these conversations?
For one reason it's difficult is because if you've never been exposed to that lifestyle, it's something that it's taboo to talk about gun violence. And when you're in a community where there's rapid gun violence, you're known as a snitch. And you don't want that reputation, so a lot of things go unanswered. And when you're labeled as a snitch, that also tells people that, well, it allows the people that, oh, they must be telling everything. But in reality, you need to snitch, because we need to get the guns off the street and take care of each other. When you have one person in the community that knows a lot, that's the person you need to be connecting with. That one person in the community. Every community got one person that know everything that go on in the community. Those are the persons that we need to have relationships with in order to give them the message so they can take the message back out into the street. So if you're not familiar with that lifestyle, then it's hard for people to talk about. Also, on the other side, if you're familiar with the lifestyle, you're still not going to talk about it, because there's a lot of trauma that comes with that lifestyle as well. And us as black and brown people, we don't talk about stuff that's happening in the house. So when I say in the house, that also means in the community. So you just need one person to step up, and that one person is your person in the community that knows everything. Those are the ones that you need to build a relationship with. And then the talks will become easier, because that person can be the catalyst for taking the message out.
I'll touch on that too, Dr. Ann, from the faith-based perspective. I know a lot of times we might not talk about it in our churches, especially our black churches, because this is a place of healing, and a place to where you deal with the aftermath of the gun violence. People come to church, they pray, they have funerals, but what you guys do in the Riverside, being on the preventative side of it, is where we need to be more focused on too. So you guys are leading by example. And I also use this blueprint to talk to other pastors, other faith communities to where you can implement these methods of conversation and awareness.
So I'm glad you touched on that, Otis. Let me piggyback with another question. So I'm going to turn to my clinician and ask the question, how can we create a space of healing when we have difficulty recognizing people's brokenness?
I think for starters is being able to create a space of vulnerability. I think a lot of times as individuals, we don't have a place to be ourselves or to really be expressive about tough times or the difficulty that we go through. And so being able to create a space, but then also showing that unconditional positive regard. I think a lot of time we kind of hold things over individuals for certain mistakes or certain acts, and understanding that nobody's perfect, but we also have to understand that by having that unconditional positive regard, we allow an individual to be their true selves and be able to be expressive.
Hello, awesome. I would also add that sometimes, right, when we talk about gun violence, it can seem very distant. Okay, there it is. When it comes to gun violence, I think that sometimes it can become very distant until it happens in your community or within your personal life, then becomes more personal. And so that's when we then kind of go and seek the help. And I think that kind of like what Derek was saying is being there, right, with empathy, right, being there to listen, right, to what is their specific needs, right, and being there to kind of like what Otis said, right, to be on the preventative side. But I would say more so is listening to what that specific person or that specific community actually needs, because we, right, as clinicians can think about, oh yeah, all the interventions out there, but nonetheless, right, the client, right, knows what is needed from them, and from there on we'll go.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. So I'm going to get into our own space of what we see. So when we hear of a gun violence in the community, we have a rapid response team. Would you guys talk a little bit about our rapid response team and how we respond to gun violence when we hear that it's occurred? So we watch the news at night and we see the shooting. I know one that touched pretty close to home for us is a recent one of a 17-year-old that got shot by a 20-year-old that really touched very close to home, because the grandmother of that person is someone I work with. And it's so it's very close to home and it's very personal. So how do we respond? You know, let's talk about our response to gun violence when it occurs.
Well, I would speak on, say if it's a shooting in the community where that involves gang or guns that's in a particular neighborhood, what we would do is Dr. Ann and our supervisor, Jarrell, would identify the neighborhood, identify the individuals involved. We would then assemble a team of Latoya, myself, and maybe one or two of our credible messengers, which are our outreach workers, accompanied by one of our clinicians, and we would go into the neighborhood that was affected, directly into the neighborhood where it happened, sometimes in front of the doorstep that it happened on, and come with resources. Our resources could look like simple as therapy, because that's the root of a lot of things, people having someone to talk to, an outlet. But we also offer alternatives to violence mitigation, conflict resolution. We have workforce development. We have other resources that we can get that person out of lifestyle. And our whole purpose of being there is to deter future acts of violence as well, and let the community know we have a presence, we love you, we will be here regardless of what, and we are here to support you. So it's not it's fairly simple for us, because we have put it in place to where, I mean, it's pretty much like clockwork now, Dr. Ann.
And to piggyback off of that, the rapid response team, we're out there within 24 to 48 hours. So there is not a lot of lag time. For one, I'm up all night looking at different things because that excites me. So I'm looking at the shootings and what areas that we need to go to. So by the time the rest of the team is up in the morning, there's already a text message out saying these are the areas that we need to go to. So we're on it very quickly, and with those resources, a lot of the community, they didn't even know that we offer a lot of those resources, because when you hear the public health department, automatically you think disease. Yeah. Like the bottom line, you think disease or something. So they didn't even know about our area of behavioral health and wellness. So we have to educate the community, and that's when our faith organizations, that's when you come in as well, because you can educate the community about what's offered out there. You see the health department, they automatically think of shots for the kids, or WIC, or things like that. They never think to come to us for therapy. They never think to come to us for resources about workforce, to get a job, to get your resume, to get your GED. Some people don't have their GED, so they never tie that to the resources that we have. So it's our due diligence in getting out in the community, and you can do a service as well by collaborating with us to get the word out also.
And I would like to add too, before we continue, another big purpose, I left it out the first time, was deter retaliation. If you have a presence outside of that home of a victim, that'll deter that family member, concerned family member that might not be thinking straight. We have a clinician there on board to let them know, either give them some type of, I don't know the correct word for intervention. Some type of intervention.
Help him out, Talisha.
Some type of intervention, so to give them the tools to not retaliate, but also put them on notice. Put that individual on notice. We know who you are. We know your family was affected. So if anything happens, they're going to come directly to you to check out, to see what happened to the person that you retaliated against. And also another point with the retaliation is we go without the police. Because that can lead to further retaliation. If we were to take the police, now somebody thinks that somebody's a snitch, and you know what they do to snitches in certain neighborhoods. So therefore, we go out there and handle those situations with our team with a purpose.
Talk a little bit, Valeria, Derek, and Alicia, about resources. We keep using the word resources. Let's break that down and talk about what is involved. But before we do that, let's pause. One of the things that the audience was concerned about is school shootings and the impact of school shootings on families, the impact of school shooting. And we're talking about families, we're talking about bio family, but church families, right? Because we're all built for connections in the community. And so let's talk about a little bit about when that occurs, and trauma plays a role in that. Where do we stand? What have we done? What are we offering to the community in the wake of that?
I'll say one of the major things is meeting the community where they are. When you're in a community where gun violence is very prevalent, or there's high violence just in general, a lot of times their only priority is safety, because that's what happens when we live through a traumatizing experience anyway. All you're trying to do is make sure you're safe for that very moment, the next moment, and that's pretty much all your mind is thinking about. And so one of the values that I really appreciate with the public health department is that we go to the community. So where they're only thinking about safety, now we show up and we're able to say, okay, safety is priority, but here's a resource. And so a resource can be counseling services. Similar to what someone else already mentioned, a lot of times like the behaviors that you see, the outward behaviors, have a lot to do with unmet needs that haven't really been addressed anyway. And so when we're able to go out to the community, start that conversation and say, there's more to it. Yes, safety is important, but there's also a conversation that can be had. There's also gun locks that we can give you. There are also other resources. Sometimes it may be medication management. Now that's something that we offer at the health department. So it's really this wraparound idea that we have to know that, one, there isn't a judgment here. We're not the police. We're not here to lock you up. We're here to just let you know that there are other options outside of what you're used to and what unfortunately has become a norm in some communities.
I'm curious, for parents that are listening or in the audience, can we talk about some behaviors that children, teens, young adults might exhibit in the home that might suggest that something is going on with them? What can we say to parents? What should they be concerned about? What should they pay attention to? let's talk a little bit about that.
So certain behaviors that you should definitely watch out for is when a certain child or kid is starting to be withdrawn from certain activities. So if a kid has been usually playing baseball after school from 4 to 6 over the last month, and then the next 2-3 weeks he's just totally not into it, he's starting to really be moody, you're starting to see a lot of attitudes, starting to realize that he doesn't have that same interest. So that's one type of indicator. Another one is when a kid or a child is starting to have a lot of temper tantrums or starting to feel like they aren't getting their way because of X, Y, and Z. That's where you start to notice that, okay, this behavior is not normal. Something is starting to really be a bothersome or an indicator that something is going on.
To add on, right, aggression, right? So if they're starting to also fight in the school or fight with the siblings, right? And also in terms of isolation, right? In terms of sometimes that comes from fear, hopelessness, right? So being able to also look into those type of behaviors.
When we look at, I'm wondering, for each of you, as far back as you can remember, when was the first time you heard a gunshot in your life, and how do you respond? How did you respond to that? And is there residual trauma from that for you now today as an adult?
For me, it was when I was 10 years old. I was at my sister's boyfriend's house. He was a gang member at that particular time, and they came and shot his house up with an AK-47. I remember like it was yesterday being tossed in a room with my sister covering over me, and it felt like it was forever, but it really only lasted for about 7 minutes or so. And just stepping out of the room and just seeing bullet holes and a person lying there bleeding and just very devastated and very traumatic that it shell-shocked me to this day.
For me, I was 17 years old, sitting on a car, and then you see on the movies how like they turn the lights off at the stop sign when they get ready to do a drive-by. It was for real. It was real life. It was real life drive-by. And I was living in California at the time, and that was my first time ever having to hit the ground and get under a car because of the gunshots, and they just came and sprayed the whole neighborhood. So that was my first time, and to this day, I can still see it just like it happened today.
I'll say my experience was a little different growing up. So I thankfully, thank God, didn't come in direct contact with the gunshot. But I have heard guns before, and just the sound of it, of course, it is alarming. And going back to that traumatic experience that your body goes through, you just go into immediate shock sometimes, and you're just like, what's going on? And then, unfortunately, with all of the gun violence, it's been so prevalent within just stores and schools and just places in the community where they just don't belong, just to be honest. And then you start finding yourself going into the store and wondering, okay, where's the exit? How am I going to be safe if there's some tragedy that occurs? And so that would be.
I'm glad you said that, because for me, I cannot sit with my back to any windows or doors. Well, one, I worked in correction for 20 years, but also because of that traumatic experience, because I need to see the entire room. And so I need to see all the exits. I can tell you where everything happening right now. And I'm looking straight ahead, and I can see everybody in this room right now because of my traumatic experience.
I would say my experience, right, it's a little bit different because you wouldn't assume, right, being in a place where there's shots up, right, when it comes to soccer games or when it comes to, going to a concert, right, soccer games, concert, right, where you assume everybody's there to have a great time, to enjoy yourself. And so my experience was just trying to grab the persons around me, right? Some siblings, some friends, right? And thinking about flight or fight, right? So usually when you encounter a difficult challenge, right, that would, force you either to freeze or to fight or to flight. And so that was my response. And, we can all have all sorts of plans, right, of, if I were to be put in this situation, I would do X, Y, and Z. But in reality, right, we could plan and we could, have really great intentions, but at the end of the day, no one really knows how our nervous system and how we are actually going to respond in that moment. So just, yeah, that was my experience.
My experience, I was about 8 years old. It was Halloween, and one of my cousins, my big cousin's friends, got killed. We heard the shots. We didn't know he was the victim at the time, but we heard the shots. It was a couple blocks over. So we just, this is John Henry Hare Holmes, Joe Johnson neighborhood, and we just thought it was normal shots. And I mean, that's crazy that I said normal shots. Yeah. Like even now, I was thinking about it. And you forced me to think about this too, Dr. Nichols. I've never thought about it the first time I heard a gunshot, or it affected me, hearing guns in the way it affected me personally. But now thinking back, I was 8 years old, it was Halloween, the guy name was Reggie, and he wake up the next morning and realize Reggie was the person, my cousin's friend was the person that got killed, and he egged somebody's car, and someone killed him for that.
Mercy, mercy. Thank you for sharing those personal stories. Now here's a sobering statistic. 200,000 homicides occur each year among kids 10 through 29. 200,000 homicide occurs each year among kids 10 through 29. We just see just a representative of that age group on the stage just by listening to the conversation. The age range on the stage was from 8 years old to 17. And so 200,000 between that just really make it real for us, why it's important to have these conversations. Otis, you said something that made me want to ask this question. Do you think we've become desensitized to the whole issue of gun violence? Something you said, normal, you know what I'm saying? Have we gotten to the place where we're accepting that this is just a normal way of life for us as a community?
I believe we have, and I think a lot of us have just became accustomed to it with all the school shootings, the mass shootings, the gun violence, the community violence. It just feels like at some point it's a never-ending story. And so if that is the case for some of us, it's just we become accustomed to it. We become, this is the normal thing, or another school shooting, and it's like, no, that's not normal. Like in no other zeitgeist or whatever the case may be is that normal. But for some reason, we have been accustomed to that, and we have become jaded to the point that a lot of us, or not a lot, but some of us just brush it off our shoulders. And that's when it becomes to a point where we really need to address this and figure out how can we intervene with this, number one, but number two, what is the solution to this chaos?
What is the solution to this chaos? What indeed is the solution? Next week when we come together, we're going to talk about, we're hoping to have a couple of faith leaders in the community, and we want to address the issue, what can the faith community do about gun violence and violence in general in our community? Violence shows up in so many ways, in our homes, in our church, in our workplace. And so I want to talk a little bit about trauma. A lot of times we're seeing young people, think about that age group, 10 through 29, behaving in a certain way. And we say, he's just bad, or this is just bad behavior. What does trauma look like for young people? Help us understand, what does trauma look like? We want to make sure that individuals that are listening online and in the sanctuary understand what trauma looks like, so we can identify what's going on in our church room, or Sunday school room, or Sabbath school room, or dinner tables in our home. When we see trauma, at least we begin to recognize Susie needs help, John needs help, Mary needs help. This is not just them trying to be defiant or behave badly, but something is seriously happening with our young people. What does trauma look like?
I would say, right, in terms of hypervigilance, right? So, of course, if you see little Johnny, right, and all of a sudden someone just, closes the door and they flinch, right, then you definitely, see the impacts of the shooting and the trauma there. Also, right, in terms of how they are either verbally or non-verbally responding, right, to parents, to loved ones. Also, in terms of, if they're having a little bit of trouble in school, majority of the times you can really look at their grades, and if they're going really down and, you're getting a lot of, calls or, emails or reports from their teachers, right, that they're, dissociating, or if they are just, not understanding what's going on in their, class, or just not having trouble with the concentration piece, right, then that could be a sign of trauma as well as not connecting with their peers, right?
And trauma reshapes you. And so, as we're talking about from a parent perspective, knowing your children, knowing what their typical behaviors look like. And when those shift, like we kind of mentioned before, being able to know that, okay, there's some type of disruption. And you may not have the answers. And as a parent, I know sometimes we take on that hat and that role where we're just like, no, I'm going to figure it out. You're going to be fine, even with faith-based. Well, no, I'm bringing you to church. We're going to pray about it. And while those measures can be helpful, there are also additional tools like therapy and like reaching out for other resources to be able to say, okay, I know Johnny was making A's and now he's making D's. I noticed that Johnny would typically be fine if I tell him to come sweep the kitchen floor, but now he's yelling at me and not even coming out of his room. A lot of times, sometimes when we're unfamiliar, we can be very quick to just respond with, well, he's just being disrespectful. He's just a bad child. We have to be mindful of what we label our children with too. But that's another topic. But ultimately, I think being aware of what your children, their changed behavior, knowing that sometimes the answer just doesn't stop with you as a parent, or you coming to church, or you just, trying to rely on other family members, but just knowing that there are other tools out there like therapy. And with the health department, we have free therapy. So you don't have to think about insurance. You don't have to think about your payment. You just give us a call, and we try to get you connected to services.
I'm not a clinician, however, I play one on TV. No, I'm just kidding. But another thing, when you talked about the bad kids, so I work with a lot of kids, and I love the bad kids, because those are the ones that I pay attention to the most, and the ones who are very quiet, who's not interacting. I always go to them and ask them, how was your day today? What you doing? Why are you over here by yourself? Things like that. So as adults, please make sure that you pay attention to the people that are sitting alone. Like, pay attention to them, go give them some love, and have other kids to go and talk to them, because there's something there. And they want to talk about it, but they don't feel comfortable talking about it. So make sure when you're scanning the room, make sure you scan for that kid that's sitting alone.
That is so powerful. Make sure when we're in the room and we're scanning the room, we look for the child that's alone. You could be in a room full of people and still be lonely. And when a young person says, I'm lonely, I say, how are you lonely? You're at church today with all your friends. We're not hearing what that person is saying. What that person is really saying is, I don't feel connected to anyone in the room. I was in the room, but I had no presence, and I was not present in the room. And that's something for us to pay attention to as adults. We need to pay attention to other adults, because the same thing could be happening to other adults in church. We believe that because we show up on Saturday or Sabbath, or we show up on Sunday, people are being very engaged, and they're not. And sometimes we miss that in the business of life. So here's a question I want to ask, because we know that cell phones and technology babysit or young adults. They babysit the children. So here's my question for you: how does social media and online culture spread in the glorification of violence when it comes to young people? What role does it play in glorifying violence?
I believe it plays a huge role. If you look just at some of the music some of the music that's out there, nothing is really motivational. Nothing is really speaking to the soul. Nothing is really speaking genuineness, any type of message or anything of that nature. I was actually talking to about this before we walked in. We are glorifying individuals who are setting bad examples. Individuals who have a track record of just harmful, distasteful type of behavior, and yet we're bigging them up on the biggest stage. But yet we were downplay somebody of Russell Wilson, who's a stand-up individual, somebody who take care of his children, an individual who has a man of honor, things of that caliber. But yet we sit here and we downplay individuals like that. So I believe that plays a huge part in what the younger generation is kind of seeing, and being able to decipher that, okay, well, we glorify individuals of this caliber, but then we downplay individuals who are really a stand-up person. And it's really starting to really kind of take it to the next level, to where now we are really seeing individuals who shouldn't be in these spotlights, be in the spotlights, but not only that, but have a huge voice to the young generation.
And I'll take it a step further and just call it what it is. Sometimes we glorify murderers in our culture, and with the younger people in the music, some of what we call gangster rap or drill music. Drill music is called drill music because a drill is an act of violence on another group of individuals. You so-called went on a drill. So if you hear somebody talking about, I'm just making you guys aware of the terminology and what's going on and what our kids are listening to and what they're talking about. Drill music is music that glorifies not just violence and crime, bars, selling or hustling or any type of that behavior, but it's direct acts of violence, using a gun. And those rappers right now have platforms that's not just on the radio or whatever, letting you hear the clean version and they're bleeping out every word or two. Social media allows these people to have followings that's global. People that wouldn't be subjected. Back in the day, you had to go to that neighborhood. Like Alicia said, she didn't hear gun violence like me and Derek or LaToya might have experienced because her parents raised her in the neighborhood like I raised my son, like we all strive to do, is upward mobility so your person doesn't have to be around those type of individuals. So what the music and social media does, it exposes individuals that don't live in those neighborhoods that would normally be subjected to that type of music or those type of actions. They now have access to those individuals. And they individuals are part of their following. So that's what social media does. It glorifies not only the good that we might see, it magnifies some of the good, checking the weather, seeing great acts, what you guys have on your social media platform, but also the bad stuff too. And unfortunately, our algorithms are built with social media to where they spread bad news faster and further than the good news. And that's just why we've done social experiments on my own, with my son. We'll see, they've done it with the comedian Pierre. He had a fake fight on his platform, a podcast. Him and the guy got to arguing, they act like they was gonna fight. It's the most viewed content on his whole platform. He's interviews legends. Some of the best insights, some of the best dialogue you'll see on the internet. But they came back a week later and talked about how it was staged, and they just wanted to check the algorithm to see how fast bad news spreads. So our algorithms in these platforms are built on controversy. It's not built, and they don't flourish from us doing positive acts. They are built for negativity, just to be quite honest. So my son is 13, and he doesn't have a social media platform. And we put screen time on his phone. It's just giving people hints. These iPhones have screen time settings to where your kid has to ask for access to YouTube. They have to ask for access to their Facebook and those Instagrams. I encourage parents to use those checks and balances in their life. Right now, to kind of shield whatever you can, because school and life is going to expose them to enough. No need to take it further and faster.
And one other thing, too, about social media is it does not go away. So for the kids who believe that they're doing things and, oh, it'll be erased in 24 hours, it never goes away. So us as parents, we also need to know this information, that it's going to stay there forever. It's in the cloud, wherever the cloud may be, but any law enforcement official can pull that information. So any acts of violence, all the things that they think go away, they do not go away.
I'm wondering, as we're having this conversation, if we have any question in the audience. We do want to give you an opportunity to ask us a question. As we're trying to drop a little knowledge, we want to make sure that we are speaking to your listening as we're talking this afternoon.
I have a couple of questions. To be honest, a whole lot of questions, but I just try to see if I can dodge my question. As a community,
Yeah, I would say yes to that, because individuals who do or end up being in accident gun violence are individuals who do suffer from mental illnesses. And so it is a correlation. So if I don't have any resources, or if I'm feeling hopelessness that I'm not able to get a job, or I can't get approved for an apartment, then my next resource is to pick up a gun and go ahead and try to get my needs by any means necessary. And so from that point on, everything is off the table. I have to get approved for this rent. I have to go ahead and make my ends meet, whatever that may look like. And so most times when you see the correlation, it's there, to answer your question specifically.
And the other thing you can add to that is people who have experienced trauma promote trauma. So traumatized people traumatizes. Victims victimize. And that's the thing we need to think about. We do not, sometimes we have to show some compassion for the person who pick up the gun and do the shooting. We have to ask ourselves the question, what made that person so totally broken that they believe it was better to kill somebody for $10 than to ask for $10? We have to ask that question. Why did that person think that was their only outcome? Can I say, I need something to eat? Can you give me something to eat? And part of that answer is they don't believe if they ask, they would receive. So I'm going to take it, like Derek says, and LaToya and all the others, by any means necessary, because I have a need that needs to get fulfilled. And we have to ask that question. How do we pour into people when we notice their brokenness and their emptiness?
So, Dr. Ed, panel, is there a disconnect? So, I grew up in a city that was, at one point, was very violent. We made the world news. Grew up in Kingston, Jamaica. But I saw gun violence in a different way growing up and what is happening today. So what you share with me was what I think it is when I was growing up. Someone would just need something, they'll shoot you, whatever. Today I see gun violence as I was sitting in church, I have no beef with anybody, just come in and shoot everybody in the church. I think it's totally different from when I was growing up. I could stay safe if I came in a church. In my classroom, I'm staying safe. If I went across the bridge, I might not be safe. If I drive down a certain street, I might not be safe. I knew where safety is for my family and I, and where I might not be safe. And if I wanted to perpetuate that life, I go in those neighborhoods. But to me, today, it just seemed like everywhere, and I don't know who it is coming from. It could be someone in my family, it could be one of my parishioners, it could be my best friend. I think that is where we're struggling for me as a community, where I don't know how to figure out where safety is anymore.
Let me jump in, then I'll let LaToya and the rest and Otis. I think one of the things we're forgetting is the role, you asked the question, that a lack of health, and when I say health, I mean mental health, plays in violence, okay? Individuals that just walk in a church and shoot up a church for the sake of shooting up a church, these are not healthy individuals. And we have to recognize that we're living in a place where mental health and wellness is so stigmatized that people don't believe it's okay to ask for help. They do not believe it is safe to ask for help. And Dr. Jones, let's be real, even in the church, people don't feel safe to ask for help because they're worried about what is someone going to say if I go and say I need some help. And so they won't ask for help. And that's the part. Childhood trauma that's unresolved in childhood bleed into adolescence and bleed into adulthood. And that unresolved trauma, those adverse childhood experiences, shows up in adults, in relationships, in churches, in workplaces, in those places. And so the trauma plays a big role. Simple things. Let me say one more thing. Simple things like you have a child at home that all of a sudden you notice that they have bottles and cups of urine lining around their bed. And the first thing that we walk away with is, oh, little Johnny is lazy. He doesn't want to go to the bathroom at night, so he's peeing in a bottle. And what we do not realize is that's a protective factor for a child that's been sexually assaulted. And so the urine or the feces is their way of trying to create safety so that the abuser will have a barrier between them and the next incidence of abuse. But because it's not our world, and that's because it's not the way we were socialized, and because it's not the way we grow up, for us, it's just he's so lazy he don't want to get up and go to the bathroom.
Yeah, I have a question concerning legal penalties and teenagers. Is there any effect on their behavior anymore? Because, when I was a kid, just hearing that the police is coming, I would be scared out of my wits.
Unfortunately, the kids these days are not scared of the police, but there are legalities to their actions if they're caught. The problem is there's not enough police officers to catch everybody, to be quite honest. And also, depending on your age, you may or may not be convicted of a crime. So each state has a different statutory age limit on if they're going to be charged and convicted of a crime. So it also depends on, that's where you come in with, I know we talk about separation of church and state, but that's why you need to be voting on the right things in the right atmosphere and talk to your legislators as well and get them on board with gun violence prevention.
I think another thing too is that I believe this generation just doesn't have that same respect for the police or authority. So the fact that if you were to call the police or you would get a security guard, they're going to try to fight them as well. We'd have seen it plethora of times. So I think mixed in with Ms. LaToya said, plus that, I think you're starting to see, the teenagers really at an all-time high of just pure disrespect to authority figures.
And I add to that too. I think just from my lens, the police have a lot to do with that as well. I think we have to hold them accountable because these kids aren't blind. They've seen Tamir Rice, they've seen Alton Sterling, they've seen certain these instances. They've seen the police terrorize their uncles. They've seen the police terrorize, falsely accuse their neighbors. They've seen people get exonerated after 40 years of being incarcerated for a crime they didn't commit. So as these people are being released and these kids are being aware of this stuff, in combination of the music they're listening to that's making them fearless, they don't have any respect for the authority figures. That's why we can come into the neighborhood sometimes, like I said, without the police and get better results because we have a skill set and expertise that we've acquired through our job and through our lived experience that can allow us to get better results. So we can, it's part of what we do with our community safety team, with LaToya, with us and Dr. Ann, is we have to hit a certain number of, because we have to increase police perception in Nashville, Tennessee. That's part of our job description, LaToya and myself. We have to mend the relationship between the community and the police. That's just what we have to do because they have a role to play, but also we have to hold them accountable so the kids have something to respect.
And also, we've been lucky enough in the community safety area to have police who care about the community. That's another thing, too. You have to have individuals who care about the community that they live and work in order to make it a better community. And we've been blessed to have working with police agencies who care about the community. And the community know them and respect them. So that's a big thing as well. So if you show up in the community and show up in the right way, then they'll invite you in and embrace you and also allow you to see things that, because they're not there to arrest them. They're there to build community and to make sure that everybody's safe. And that's the #1 priority.
Okay, 2 more questions. First one is, in harmony with the discussion on the police and policing and gun violence. was in the precinct a few months ago, and we in a meeting, they were sharing with us about how there are more people are now armed. So, you know, you can literally get a gun, especially in Tennessee, you can get a gun. The laws are more relaxed for owning firearms. And the challenge now is accessibility. And would you want to comment on that a bit? Because, you know, the country, that part of its constitution, the freedom to bear arms, so there are a lot of Christians and people who love Jesus who are having firearms and they're packing. Can we talk about how to, you know, and I know you have some gun locks tonight, but could we bring that in context within our church or within Christianity that, well, we're not here trying to take away your constitutional right, but there is an onus on us to also keep our communities safe. Because that is something that at the precinct, the constable, they talk about how in some of the most affluent communities, it's not just in, you know, broken neighborhoods, in affluent communities, they leave their guns in their cars in the driveway, and the kids just go in those neighborhoods and they can walk away 20 guns in one night. So would you want to comment and just kind of bring that home for us?
I think I'm going to start and go down the line for everyone. Here's the thing we need to think about. Car theft and break-ins have increased in the Nashville community. And one of the things we know that people are leaving the expensive things in the car. They're looking for guns. They're looking to see if there are guns in those cars and taking those guns out of the car to do harm. Nobody's grabbing a gun just because it's cute. There's intentionality that's not positive around that. We're not here as a team to police people's gun, but what we're here to say is get a gun lock, lock your guns up, and remove your bullets from those guns and keep them separate from your gun. Our message is clear. What you do is personal. That is your boundary. That is your choice. It's your right to bear arms. But your right also ends where somebody becomes unsafe with the bearing of your arms because you didn't lock it up. You didn't keep it safe. Somebody breaks in your car. Take it, take the bullet, and go to the next neighborhood and kill someone with your gun. So what we're saying is if you have legally obtained a gun, let me put that there, legally obtained firearms, we would want you to lock that up and separate that firearms from the bullets so they're not in the same place. A few years ago, right here at Riverside, I was here, it was a Saturday, and we had where a young man from one of our academies was graduating, got accepted, I think Dr. B might remember, got accepted into several universities. And 2 weeks before graduation from one of our schools, came in, had dinner on a Friday night with his family, did devotion, made plans to go to church the next day with his family, and when his family went to bed, slipped out of the house. Mom woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning, didn't see her son, started looking, started combing, started calling friends, started doing everything to find that young man. Could not. And they found him in a park just a couple of miles away from his home where he had taken a gun and put a bullet to his head. And I remember that Sabbath being right here at Riverside, and those young people in that room were broken because this was their classmate. He was on the sports team, and they could not understand it. And so that's the thing for us to think about. What gets a person to that place where it appears that they have everything going for them, and yet and still they make the decision to take their own life? Peer pressure is real. Let me go a lot further. Parental pressure is real. I want to say to parents listening, bees make degrees. Bees make degrees. We put a lot of pressure on our kids to be straight A's. And so if they don't make the grade, they feel like they've let families down and parents down. and the legacy down, and they don't think their life is worth living. The whole issue around gun is safety first. Lock it up, keep it away from our children, keep it in a safe place in the home. Talk about gun safety. Talk to your child about why this is not a weapon that they should try. We have to have those conversations. Instead of texting each other at the dinner table, we need to be talking to each other at the dinner table about issues that are affecting our children and giving them a forum to have those conversations. But most of the time, we don't want to deal with it. We don't want to have the conversation, so our children don't feel like they can talk to us. Tagging, guys.
Well, to follow back what Dr. Anders said, I think having those tough conversations definitely, is needed in the household because, again, you can't shield your kid forever. They're going to get some type of exposure one way or another. But it's at a certain time or at a certain age to be able to have that conversation and telling them no that, hey, this is a particular weapon. This is how, making sure that you teach them the rules and the kind of like the regulations of when it's time to use it, this is how it's supposed to be. But at that time being is making sure you're using your gun lock, making sure you're, removing the bullets from the gun, making sure you're putting it in a place where only you and you know where it's at. That's the biggest thing, because just like Dr. Rand said, the kid slipped out at 2 a.m. in the morning and knew exactly what the gun was. And that can only happen if you're doing it in the presence of the child. So moving forward is knowing that, hey, if you are, if you are keeping guns in the household, is to put them in a safe place where no one besides you or, whoever else is the adult in the household can have access to them.
Another thing, too, is to change the narrative. We talk a lot about gun violence. We don't talk enough about safety in the household. So when you're change the narrative, don't talk about violence, because that's going to pique their interest, because that's all they see right now. And so talk about more along the lines of safety and keeping the family safe and making sure that they're safe. So change the narrative as well so that they understand that violence is violence and that's something that is bad versus safety, and they will want to keep everybody safe in the house. So changing the narrative of the words that you use in your household are very imperative as well.
And I'll speak on this too, and especially from the faith-based community, you can't make guns taboo. Some of our white counterparts, they familiarize their young kids with guns, so it's not a mystique around it. It's not a glorification around it because they are educated that this has a certain purpose. We hunt, we go outdoors, it's a form of protection, and they contextualize what that gun actually is and what it's meant for. We try to shield our kids from reality a lot too, because even though my son might not have social media, guess what? I've sent him places to where he has got gun training. So that's a reality. I don't want him to take in the bad music from social media, but I want him to be aware and know how to operate a gun, not from a place of glorification, but from a place of, this is what the world we're in, and you're going to eventually might want to own one of these one day. So just being realistic, man. We just have to be more realistic and stop making things taboo. Black people, because I'm black, I can talk about us. We try to take a lot of stuff off the table and hide this and make it sex. We do the same thing with sex. We do the same thing with guns. We try to hide these realities from our kid, and it makes them more curious to what Toya said.
Here's my final question for the night. We've been talking a lot about the negativity surrounding gun violence, but I'd like us to leave here with a message of hope for individuals that are listening online and in the audience. So
before you go to your thing of hope, last thing.
Go ahead, Doc. We're in your house.
I'm sorry. I'm monopolizing.
You're good.
But this can be real for our community. One of the worst things as a pastor I'd want to know is that we experience that. I've experienced a suicide, all of that, and it has affected me. Maybe that's why I lost my hair. Anyway, on this past Saturday, I was in a community. And we had a judge, and they were talking about as a church and as Christians, especially in our community, Seventh-day Adventist Church, we're sometimes in a bubble. We're shielded from a lot of things that's happening in the community, And one of the things he was pointing about that piqued my attention or my curiosity was there is a whole language, you know, the whole culture among the kids and young adults. Like they have their own codes and everything that as adults we have to start to kind of learn these codes so we can be able better to assist. Like he was saying things I didn't even know. I mean, we had an experience a few months ago about a kid wanting to go to jail. And that, you know, he wanted to go to jail that night. He was like, I want to go to jail. And he was doing things to go to jail. And for me, that was like, I couldn't understand that. I know back in the day when I was growing up, you know, you're in a gang, you're going to do initiation. But he wasn't in a gang or anything. It's not like he was initiated to anything. But it was cool for him to go to jail. Where could we as a community maybe find some of those, learn that language as parents? How can we educate ourselves? So we, or even as a pastor, how can I educate myself, my young adult pastor, so we can be a better identify when you're saying these things, these codes thrown around the church or in meetings? Because that was an eye-opening thing for me this Saturday.
I got this one.
Okay, thank you.
I got this one.
Yes, sir. That's why I wanted you to answer that.
Volunteer with Dr. Ann. They do a lot of outreach in our community through the public health department. She's open to volunteers. I think coming to some of our events, to which it's a controlled environment, to where we have experts, clinicians, violence experts, we have everybody, police, to where you can interact with the community and really see how these kids in some of these underserved communities, how they talk, how they act, their language, their mannerisms. You have to be present. Sometimes when you're in a place of affluence, you don't go down to what we call the hood. The things that our kids are doing that have some type of influence are being influenced by the hood. Brian and James not set the trends. The guys in the hood are setting the trends that our kids follow. Let's go to the source. Church can't just stop within these four walls. You have to go get active in it. And she has avenues to where people can go out here and get this experience and get involved. You know what I mean? So I think that's the first thing too, getting outside these four walls and getting involved.
Oh, that was exactly what I was about to say. You have to go to the source. You can Google it if you want to, but it won't be like the source. you have to go to the source and you have to immerse yourself in community. When you do that, I promise you, you're going to learn more than you want to know. But you'll know it for when something happens or when someone is speaking, or you can be at, we boycott Target, but at Walmart, you can be at Walmart and they'll say something, a young kid, and you'll know what it is because you've been in that community. So you'll know right after that. So you have to immerse yourself into the community.
I think from a clinical side, it's just meeting the kids where they are, having those restorative conversations with them. Again, you know, for them, they look at us as, you know, unorthodox figures because we can't relate to their language or relate to what they're going through, but meeting them where they are, being an active listener, showing empathy, right? Those are ways to really, truly understand the essence of a person. So I believe by doing those things, you can get to the root of it, but also just having an environment where they can be themselves. I think that's going to be the biggest thing, especially for, you know, the faith-based community, because some of us can be very judgmental off of others' past mistakes that we won't accept them for who they really are. And we hold that over their heads a lot. And so if we kind of break that down some or kind of get rid of that stereotype, you'll start to see a lot of individuals or even the younger generation really start to be showing you guys with welcome arms.
In addition, I would say that too, right, in terms of in a faith-based community, right, you gotta go to your youth, right, and be empathetic, understanding, and share with them, right, of like, I'm actually want to be here for you, right. I have my own thoughts as a pastor, as a mom, or as a, you know, an authoritative figure, right, but I'm here, like, you teach me, right, because they're so used to, you know, having an authority figure to always telling them what to do, how to behave, right, to tell them what is socially accepted or not. And so just being able to connect with them, right, and gently ask, right, like, what is it that you need to understand, right, in terms of, you know, about, you know, gun safety, gun violence, right? And also in terms of diving into what's important to them, right? Because when it comes to that psychosocial and psychological development, right, when they're 12, 13, 14, right, their primary concern is connection with their peers and also to feel accepted, right? So what does that mean for them, right? Because it all blends into, social media and being liked and, how many followers they have. And it comes to, trying substances, right? And trying to, impress someone with guns or whatnot, right? So it's really going towards them and trying to connect and trying to see what is important to you, right? What does connection mean to you, right? And therefore building that conversation about safety and what life is, right? And the world looks like right now. And that's my thoughts on that.
So, did you have a thought, Angela? Let me just say, I want to just thank you for being gracious to us and welcoming and listening. And as I was standing here looking, I can see, that individuals are cued and it's important. The final thing I will say is ask the kids themselves. Just ask the kids, what's language is being used in your social circle? I'll tell you a funny story. So, I have a 17-year-old and we were in the house and she comes in and she said, Nana, I got to pour you some tea. And I was like, I don't really want any tea right now. I'm okay. I want something cold. She said, no. I have to give you the tea. And I was like, what tea? I don't want any tea. What she was really saying to me is that I got to tell you what the gossip is. I have to tell you what the information is, what's going around. So we have to learn their lingo. I was like, oh, so that's called the tea. She said, yes. So when I tell you I have to pour you some tea, it means I have information that I want to share with you. And so I would say ask the kids. Ask the kids, ask the kids. They'll educate you about what the things mean. And you're like, pour the tea, honey. I am all ears. So that's a part of it, is to engage. We're hoping that something we said this evening resonated with someone, was helpful, open for broader conversation around the audience, and you found that your time was well spent with us this evening. I'll just say, leave a message of hope, quickly. Otis, if you had to leave a message of hope, what would you say to those listening online and in the audience?
Don't give up. Don't give up. Keep fighting, even if you think your words are landing on deaf ears. They're really not. These kids, sometimes they refer back to these messages and these moments of wisdom. When you impart wisdom, they might be 15, they might be 50. But they're listening, they're going to eventually use it too. So just don't give up on the youth.
I would say don't freeze up, because we're looking right at the news, we're hearing so many bad things, right? Take a time to show them and show yourself, right? And make some time for gratitude, right? And don't freeze up on, oh my God, this is happening, oh my God. So don't function in the fight or freeze or flight mode, but learn mindfulness, right? Learn to regulate yourself first, because that's how you really show up for your kids and also show them, because they don't know. We have to show them.
I'll say we need you. There's a unique gift, purpose, word, connection that this world needs you specifically to give. And without you giving it, we won't have it. So please don't give up and give the world what's inside of you.
For me, if you don't give anything else to anybody else, make sure you give them hope, because hope drives everything. So if you don't leave with anything else tonight, leave with the aspect that you can give somebody hope.
Mine is going to kind of be the same, but hope for the youth. Just instilling hope really goes a long way for kiddos and just for individuals itself, giving them a sense of believing in something bigger, a sense of pride, a sense of joy. I think that goes a long way with really getting them connected.
And my final one is, we believe in you, and we believe that you can be successful in whatever way you define success. So let's not be the person defining success, but give them a voice in what success looks like for them. Thank you so much for being a great audience. Thank you so much for being welcoming. We appreciate it. Thank you, Otis. Thanks, Valeria. Thanks, Alicia. Thank you, LaToya. And thanks, Derek, for being with us tonight.
Before you go, I would like to have a word of prayer, but let's, Dr. Ann, I have been checking with the young people at the university, so I'm locked in, and I'm going to tell them tomorrow I need my tea steamed. I need all the information. I need all the information. So at this time, can we stand, please, as we pray? And I'm going to ask a special blessing upon these people as they go into these neighborhoods, because some of us are afraid of these neighborhoods, but they're not. So let us pray. Heavenly Father, we are grateful to you for what we have received tonight. Lord, we know that someplace, sometime, somehow, we need to use this information to bring hope, to bring cheer, to bring comfort, to bring a sense of well-being to someone. Lord, we ask that you will give us strength when we need to do this. Give us courage to do it. Father, I thank you for this team that came here tonight with Dr. Ann. Lord, they have a very hard task of seeking to find people who are broken, people who have nothing left, and to instill in them hope, to instill in them that there is a future. Father, I pray your blessing upon them. I ask God that even though they're doing this in a professional capacity, that Lord, you will reward them. Help them to know that they are making a difference in this community and in our world. Father, I pray tonight that as we go from here, you will please take us home safely and grant us, Lord, the opportunity of coming back to be refreshed so that we too can go and instill hope. This we pray and ask in Jesus' name. Amen.